Hello everyone. It's Saturday morning. It's market day in Wantage town centre, and I am just below the King Alfred statue. And you're probably wondering, why am I doing that? An interesting news article was brought to my attention earlier this week. It was in the Daily Telegraph. Of, always want to get my sources right, of the 31st of August 2024, and basically one of our well-respected universities in England, the University of Nottingham, have more or less removed the word Anglo-Saxon from their course. Now, their thinking is that they're trying to decolonise their curriculum, and supposedly the word Anglo-Saxon has been used by the far right. Well, the supposed far right. I just wonder sometimes whether they're making up these bête noire, black beasts. Anyway, I'm outside or just below the King Alfred statue. Now, King Alfred was an Anglo-Saxon king who was born in Wantage, hence why they put up a statue to him in 1877. Now, he was one of the kings, his brother and his father, who saw off, or tried to see off, the Vikings. His brother and his father weren't that successful, but King Alfred the Great, was successful in stopping the Viking invasion of Wessex, and in fact putting the Viking threat to bed. Now, he was someone who was quite learned, King Alfred, and he promoted education, he promoted justice and the law. In fact, the jury system is something he promoted, and it probably was some of the laws, or at least the philosophy, was probably the forerunner to what became the Magna Carta many centuries later. Now, the statue was, as I probably mentioned, put up in 1877 by someone called Lord Wantage, Robert Lloyd Lindsay, who was who fought a campaign in the Crimea and was awarded the Victoria Cross, and subsequently was one of the founders of the British Red Cross. But I think today's podcast is mainly about how our history is either being removed or cancelled or besmirched as being racist or colonial in some ways. And I'm just worried that perhaps it starts with our history, perhaps it starts with our words. Perhaps, no doubt, the crazy people out there would want to remove the statue of King Alfred. And once they start removing statues, perhaps the next stage would be actually wanting to remove people or even races. Perhaps the Anglo-Saxons, perhaps the English.
You're listening to the Beehive Yourself show, chronicling the abolition of England, the English, and the Shire, week by week.
Okay, I really just want to set the scene on this a little bit from my own personal experience. This kind of, I don't know what to call it really, maybe it's cancel culture, maybe it's anti-English, indigenous white people racism, which the whole system is against us. But this has been going on for at least 20 years, probably longer. And I suppose if perhaps the English never existed, then in some ways that would be quite convenient for the powers at B. I mean, people who can control history can probably control the future. My children, the two oldest, went to the local Church of England school. It was Wantage Church of England school, and the parents got invited in, and the teacher perhaps was describing what they had been doing, and that the children are there and they did something or other. And they were doing, or they had done, a project or a topic on Mary Seacole, and the thrust of it was that she was a nurse in the Crimea, and she was a black nurse. I think these people are obsessed with ethnicity and the colour of skin. Really, these teachers, anyone who works in the public sector, seems to be. But what was astonishing was either the ignorance of the teachers, or the fact that, and I suspect this, perhaps the teachers were doing political activism. Now, let's go to the context, because in some ways this was a missed opportunity. If you were a teacher teaching, I don't know what they were trying to teach, to be honest with you, but if you were teaching the mid-19th century, and perhaps if you were teaching nursing, which I think some of the thrust of this project was to do with nursing, then there are some local links, and some of these teachers actually do live in Wantage, so their ignorance completely astonished me sometimes. Okay, let's go to 1850, I think it's 1854, something like that. And Britain and France were allies against a war against Russia. Kind of, I don't know, echoes of what's happening perhaps today in Ukraine. Crimea was part of Ukraine and until relatively recently. So there's a mirror there, but Britain and France, for some reason, wanted to start a war in the Crimea. The reason for the Crimean campaign, the Crimean War, something to do with the Greek Church, Orthodox Church, and in some ways it's a pretty nonsense war. Why they were there, what they were trying to do, the British and French, I don't believe, no, but a lieutenant, Robert Lindsay, showed a remarkable feat of bravery. Let me just read this out. Now, I'd just like to point out to begin with that the Victoria Cross in the British Army is the highest honour you can get. So let me just read this out. The Victoria Cross is the highest honour which can be earned by our army. It is awarded only for distinguished bravery on the field of battle. The Germans have their Iron Cross, the Austrians the Order of Maria Theresa, the Russians the Cross of St. George, and our British soldiers the Victoria Cross. In the few pictures to be presented to you, and this is, I'm reading part of a pamphlet which was which supported a series of magic lantern slides, just to give you the context. In the few pictures presented to you will be found some of the stirring scenes made memorable for deeds of exceptional daring, many hundreds of which, however, can be found in the annals of the British Army. It was not until 1854 that this special distinction of the Victoria Cross was instituted by the Queen, that's probably Queen Victoria, and since that time it has become the most coveted decoration of our soldiers and sailors. So a little bit of a correction there. If you're a sailor, you can also get the Victoria Cross. Probably if you're in the Royal Air Force, you probably can as well. I'm not sure on that last point though. It is in the shape of the Maltese cross and made of ordinary gunmetal, so that it bears no pecuniary value, and yet no sum offered would be possibly tempt its proud possessor to part with it. Now, I'm now going to go on to the one which there's the local connection, the connection to Wantage, or more latter day to that was the Lochanger estate. Lieutenant Robert Lindsay of the 1st Battalion Scots Fusilier Guards calmly advancing up the slope to attack the Russian batteries at the Battle of Alma, Crimean War 1854. This was the first battle in which the brave Lieutenant Lindsay was engaged, and for which he obtained the Victoria Cross. He had charge of the colours of his regiment, and consequently made a conspicuous mark for the enemy to fire at. They always particularly endeavour to shoot down the man who carries the flag, as it tends to discourage the regiment if their colours are laid in the dust. Wherever the flag is carried, every soldier deems it a point of honour to follow. Calmly, as if he had already been in a score of battles, Lieutenant Lindsay advanced up the slopes from the river towards the Russian position, and at the close of the day the Queen's colours which he carried were found to have no less than 23 shot holes and the staff broken. At the time of his heroic deed, Lieutenant Lindsay was but 21 years of age. So during the Crimean War, there was lots of carnage, as you would expect, and one individual became famous. It was Florence Nightingale, and she sort of organised the nursing for the during some of these horrific battles, and ensured proper hygiene was undertaken, and how hospitals were organised, and then she went on to found a teaching school for nursing, and made prominent the profession of female nursing, and she was she participated in setting up and supporting the British Red Cross. So she went down in history being a pioneer of nursing, and she was recognised for this at the time, and in subsequent decades she was. Lieutenant Robert Lindsay also had a part in setting up, in fact a significant part in setting up the British Red Cross, which which was there to provide medical aid on the battlefields, regardless of who the soldiers were fighting for. And he married one of the Harriet Lloyd, and they set up the Lockinge estate, which is an estate which is next door to Wantage. And Robert Lloyd Lindsay was very much interested in having almost a model estate, whereby he was a social reformer, very conscientious about the welfare of his staff, and in fact there was a profit sharing scheme on the farm on the estate for the labourers. He was interested in civic life, and he actually commissioned the King Alfred statue. And it's funny that King Alfred, on that statue, has a canny resemblance to Robert Lindsay, and he later became Robert Lloyd Lindsay, and later he became first Baron Wantage, so he was Lord Wantage. Now that story, that would have made a brilliant project for the children. There would have been the nursing aspect of it. There would be the local connection. You could have talked about some of the good things that Lord Wantage had done. I mean, there may have been family connections in Wantage and the nearby villages to say the Lockinge estate and this, that and the other. But no. And I think this is perhaps with some teachers, you could give them benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're just ignorant. Maybe I'd put the adjective pig ignorance. But I think some of these teachers, certainly perhaps some of the universities they've gone through, it's almost as if they've been reframed or mind controlled. It's almost as if they see their purpose in life when they're conducting their job, their profession, is to indoctrinate the children in some sort of Marxism. Now, so instead of the teacher teaching about Florence Nightingale, who I think, in terms of merit, if we live in a meritocracy, I don't think we do anymore, deserves to be put in history. They decided to teach Mary Seacole, who really didn't really have much of a part to play in the Crimean War, apart from doing the catering. One of the places Florence Nightingale helped to found was St Thomas's Hospital, which had a connection with, I think perhaps that was to do with nursing, and they erected a statue of Mary Seacole there. But a society was formed in, I think, around 2010. A sociology professor, Lynn MacDonald, is the co-founder of the Nightingale Society, which promotes the legacy of Nightingale, who did not see eye to eye with Seacole. MacDonald believes that Seacole's role in the Crimean War was overplayed, and this is what she wrote. So this was in the TLS publication, 6th of December 2013, page 24, and I quote: "Mary Seacole, although never the black British nurse she is claimed to have been, was a successful mixed-race immigrant to Britain. She led an adventurous life, and her memoir of 1857 is still a lively read. She was kind and generous. She made friends of her customers, army and navy officers who came to her rescue with her funds when she was declared bankrupt. While her cures have been vastly exaggerated, she doubtless did what she could to ease suffering when no effective cures existed. In epidemics pre-Crimea, she has said a comforting words to the dying and closed the eyes of the dead. During the Crimean War, probably her greatest kindness was to serve hot tea and lemonade to cold, suffering soldiers awaiting transport to hospital on the wharf at Balaclava. She deserves much credit for rising to the occasion, but her tea and lemonade did not save lives, pioneer nursing or advance healthcare. So, this story I've told you about the school was probably around something like, 2007, 2008. So I was incredulous when I received, or it came to my attention, that they were going to remove the word or the term. Could be a term, could be a word, could be a phrase, Anglo-Saxon from the university's module titles. But it does make me wonder whether the university would still use the term during its teaching. And this is from the term Anglo-Saxon has been removed from the university's module titles to tackle nationalist narratives. I really do wonder whether this nationalist narrative really exists. The problem is with words. The words Anglo-Saxon is probably quite precise, and they're going to change it to in favour of early medieval English. The interesting thing is, I think, looking at the direction of travel, where do we get the word English from? What's the etymology of the word English? Right. So let's have a look at the direction of travel with the etymology of the word English from the Oxford English Dictionary. The original sense of the adjective must have been of or belonging to the Angles, i.e. with reference to a Germanic tribe which apparently inhabited the district of Anglin in the south of the Jutis Peninsula around 400 AD, and was so named on account of its area of settlement. So we get the word English from the word Angle. I mean, certainly you could trace Anglo-Saxon language through to early English, Old English, modern English, etc. Okay, so they're thinking, I say they, I don't know what you would call this undescribable blob, the reframed ones. Okay, so they ban the word Anglo-Saxon from their titles, and then they may probably ban it from the actual content of the course. But what's the direction of travel then? What if this supposed, this notional far right, whatever they are, whoever they are, I'm sure all this has been made up. It's all in the imagination of perhaps these communists, or Marxists or Trotskyists, or whatever they are. I don't know. What if they discover the far right, in quotation marks, also use the word England and English? Okay, well, are they then going to ban the term English or England? I think in many ways they've certainly tried to ban the word English from a lot of quangos in Britain. And what they've done is, say for instance, if you have a quango which is to do with sport in England, English sport, you wouldn't call it English sport, you would just call it Sport England. You would swap the words around, because English is a language, but English could be a race. People might identify themselves as English, especially if you live in England, especially if you were born in England, especially if your heritage was from England. Maybe you are the English, but maybe that's a prohibited word now. Maybe the whole history of England is going to go into some memory hole, to quote Orwell. The other interesting thing, certainly from where I live in Wantage, the northern boundary of the old county, what they did in 1974, they had boundary changes. So much of the northern part of the county, which just so happens to also be called the Vale of the White Horse, and that term, Vale of the White Horse, you could link that back to, I think, the 13th or 14th century. So that term's quite old in itself. Well, North Berkshire, or Vale of the White Horse, the northern boundary was the Thames. In fact, the northern and the eastern boundary was the Thames, and that was the boundary during the Viking invasions between Wessex and the north. North would have been under Danelaw, or the Viking rule. So the place where I come from, there is quite a significant history with to do with the Anglo-Saxons and their achievements. But there's another connection certainly nearby. We're not that far away from Oxford. I would say maybe it's 10-12 miles from Wantage to Oxford, something like that. I might be wrong. But back in the 20th century, there was this bloke called J.R.R. Tolkein, and he was the professor of Anglo-Saxon at Oxford University. And in part of his life, he lived not so far away from here in the town of Lambourne, which is on the Berkshire Downs. And people perhaps have considered that some of the places, perhaps some around or described in Lord of the Rings, have been taken or been influenced from what Tolkien experienced in the Vale of the White Horse and other places in this neck of the woods. So if you're going to get rid of Anglo-Saxon and then the term English, they've been working on that for a long time, and also erase out of history some of our notable people like, I don't know, Florence Nightingale and perhaps even Lord Wantage. Then the next thing I can only assume that they'll want to come for is perhaps Lord of the Rings, or perhaps they'll keep Lord of the Rings but perhaps redefine it. Perhaps I don't know, make movies of it where the people don't actually look English or anything out of the imagination of Tolkien. They might redefine it, and I think they're doing this in some ways. Such a shame that that life is going to be so bland if no different cultures exist. It's as if some of these people in power want to create some sort of year zero, like the communists did, or perhaps what Pol Pot did, or the Cultural Revolution, which was in China, whereby they tried to erase history and culture and start from year zero and have a glorious future with our dear leader. And this is kind of what we're seeing now. So particularly with this new left-wing regime we've got in this country, which does seem to be very anti free speech. It does seem to be very anti white working class. It does seem that it's almost the precursor to some sort of apartheid system. Certainly I've seen for a long time, certainly since the COVID what do we call it? Was there ever a COVID virus, or what was scandemic perhaps? But certainly my attendance at some of the marches in London, you could see there was some sort of two-tier policing going on. You know, I was heard about street crime in London, and yeah, I witnessed it. It was from the Met Police. I kind of think that perhaps they're trying to erase England, the English, and the Shire. I thought I would finish off this episode by reading the description on the plaque, which is attached to the statue of King Alfred in Wantage. So here goes. Alfred the Great, the West Saxon king, born at Wantage at AD 849, Alfred found learning dead, and he restored it, education neglected, and he revived it, the laws powerless, and he gave them force, the church debased, and he raised it, the land ravaged by a fearful enemy, from which he delivered it. Alfred's name will live as long as mankind shall respect the past. Thank you to those who have reached out to me. I was asked by one listener if they can pre-order my book. Well, at this point in time, no. But what would really help me is if you could subscribe to my Substack. There is a free subscription option. This will help me demonstrate to potential publishers that I have a sufficient audience for my book. The link to the Substack is in the show notes. As always, you can contact me directly by email, podcast@behaveyourself.co.uk. You can follow and support my work by visiting behaveyourself.co.uk or visit my Substack. My handle is @behaveyourselfshow. The music is called Solitude by Entertainment for the Brain Dead and was created under a Creative Commons license. And this concludes this instalment of the Behave Yourself Show. And until next time, stay well.